Hey, Facebook. Looks like I'm live. I did not publicize this ahead of time. I've learned my lesson. Maybe not to try that so much because, like after last night, I said I was going to try to come on, and even said there was a high likelihood I would be on, and it didn't pan out. So I don't want to string people along and then have them disappointed. So surprise, here I am. I'm talking about the topic I was trying to get to last night, which is going to be Daniel 9. Um, First off, if anybody is watching this, please let me know if the sound is okay. The last time there was lots of RF interference. Um, I don't have headphones on, so I can't tell if that's the case or not. So please let me know if that happens. I'm going to assume for now that the feed is okay. Um, so Daniel chapter 9. Why am I talking about Daniel chapter 9? If you follow the news, you know that President Trump just released his much anticipated peace treaty. It's really not a peace treaty. It's the deal of the century, right? With Israel, and the Palestinians. He had Benny Gantz and Netanyahu over at the White House on Tuesday, and announced the details. There's even a fancy map, and some people are enthusiastic about it. A lot of people are freaking out. And I just kind of followed some of the chatter online just to kind of see what the pulse of the public was on it, and some of the stuff that just really just had me cracking up. I'm reading comments like, oh, was it a 7 year deal? And people are like, no, it was only 4 years. And oh, good, so he's not the Antichrist. Because the Antichrist is supposed to sign this 7 year peace treaty with Israel, right? So if this is a 4 year deal, then that automatically rules Trump out as Antichrist. Was the thinking. And then, of course, you've got people who are like, oh, he's dividing the land. And, they quote Yahweh's words to Abraham, whoever blesses you, I'll bless. Whoever curses you, I'll curse. Of course, he reiterates that down through the line, different contexts. But I see I have one viewer. Does it sound okay? Can you comment if you hear me all right? Because the last time I had audio issues. Pretty please. Yep, just do a quick comment if you don't mind. I see you watching. No response. Okay, that's fine. That's cool. um, anyway, it must not be that bad. So to continue, that's what was just kind of funny yesterday is as everybody was looking at, trying to nitpick the details on this thing and like, is this the covenant? Is this the 7 year covenant that starts the tribulation? You know? And that's based largely on Daniel chapter 9. And I think it's a misunderstanding of Daniel chapter 9. So I want to dig into that, and I fully realize that what I'm about to present here is an unorthodox approach to Daniel chapter 9. I just listened earlier today to Chuck Missler doing a presentation on it, and basically the party line, it's the 70 weeks. We've already had the 69. There's a long gap in time of almost 2,000 years. And then we're still waiting on the 70th week to start, which is going to be a 7 year period. And it starts with the peace deal that the Antichrist does. 3.5 years into it, he sets up the abomination of desolation, which starts the Great Tribulation, and then here we're off and rolling, right? That's the prevailing view among like evangelicals, anybody that's got a futurist type eschatology that's watching all this stuff. So anyway, I'm going to get, because my whole thing with Daniel chapter 9 is people typically tend to skip to the very end, right? With the prophecy of the 70 weeks, and specifically the last tail end of it, the 70th week, right? Because why would we focus on something that's already happened? We're looking in the future to see when Jesus is going to come. So I want to focus on the entire chapter, which Chuck Missler, to his credit, in this one specific teaching, he did look at the whole chapter. I just think he misapplied it. So I'm going to look at that. I'm going to look at, first off, why do we even have a Daniel chapter 9? I think that's an important question to answer. And I'm going to get started on a setup. I'm not even going to start reading in Daniel. I'm going to read in the book of Leviticus. Okay? Now, Leviticus, Yahweh's given the commandments, and we know the long sections of the blessings and the curses. Okay? And So I'm going to read from some of the curses and keep some of the language in mind that I'm going to read here because it's going to be important as we get into Daniel chapter 9 later. I'm going to start in Leviticus 26. And I'm just going to start in verse 23 just for overall context, and I'll just keep reading a while. And if by these things you are not turned to me, Yahweh, but act with hostility against me, then I will act with hostility against you. And I, even I, will strike you 7 times for your sins. I will also bring upon you a sword, which will execute vengeance for the covenant. And when you gather together into your cities, I will send pestilence among you, so that you shall be delivered into enemy hands. When I break your staff of bread, 10 women will bake your bread in one oven, and they will bring back your bread in rationed amounts, so that you will eat and not be satisfied. Yet if in spite of this you do not obey me, but act with hostility against me, then I will act with wrathful hostility against you, and I, even I, will punish you 7 times for your sins. Further, you will eat the flesh of your sons, and the flesh of your daughters you will eat. I then will destroy your high places, and cut down your incense altars, and heap your remains on the remains of your idols, for my soul shall abhor you. I will lay waste your cities as well, and will make your sanctuaries desolate, and I will not smell your soothing aromas. I will make the land desolate, so that your enemies who settle in it will be appalled over it. You, however, I will scatter among the nations, and will draw out a sword after you, as your land becomes desolate, and your cities become waste. Then the land will enjoy, and this is key, so lock in on this part. Then the land will enjoy its Sabbaths all the days of the desolation, while you are in your enemy's land. Then the land will rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. All the days of its desolation it will observe the rest which it did not observe on your Sabbaths, while you were living on it. As for those of you who may be left, I will also bring weakness into their hearts in the lands of their enemies, and the sound of a driven leaf will chase them. And even when no one is pursuing, they will flee as though from the sword, and they will fall. They will therefore stumble over each other as if running from the sword, although no one is pursuing. You will have no strength to stand up before your enemies, but you will perish among the nations, and your enemies' land will consume you. So those of you who may be left will rot away because of their iniquity in the lands of your enemies, and also because of the iniquities of their forefathers, they will rot away with them. Okay, so some important things here. We're talking about the covenant. Okay, we mentioned that earlier. This is all part of the covenant. A covenant is an agreement between 2 parties to do something. Okay, so if when I signed the deed on my house, or not the deed, the mortgage, I made a covenant with the bank. They agreed to pay for the house, and I agreed to pay them back for the house with a certain amount of interest. It's a 2-way agreement. And in that mortgage, there are specific terms, and there are specific penalties for if either party, breaks the terms of that covenant. I have legal ramifications if I, fail to live up to my end, and if they, have monkey business on their end too, I could, sue them or whatever, depending on how the mortgage is set up. So that's a modern day covenant, okay? So that's what we're looking at here. This is covenant language, okay? So what's the big deal here? Okay, Israel's going to be kicked out of the land because they're not keeping the land Sabbaths. Every 7 years, Yahweh wants the people to let the land lie fallow, okay? Israel never really did that. They kept a lot of the commandments. They did pretty good in spurts. They fell off the wagon frequently, but when they were keeping the commandments, they did pretty good, except even then they never kept the Sabbath years. Okay, they never gave the land a rest. So that's the setup. Okay, this is where all of this stems from. Okay, so now we're going to go to Jeremiah. We're going to see Jeremiah prophesy the fulfillment of some of these curses. Okay, we're going to read in Jeremiah. I'm just going to start in chapter 25. Okay, Jeremiah 25. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah. That was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, which Jeremiah the prophet spoke to all the people of Judah and to all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, saying, From the 13th year of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, even to this day, these 23 years the word of Yahweh has come to me, and I have spoken to you again and again, but you have not listened. And Yahweh has sent to you all his servants the prophets again and again, but you have not listened nor inclined your ear to hear, saying, Turn now every one from his evil way and from the evil of your deeds, and dwell on the land which Yahweh has given to you and your forefathers forever and ever. And do not go after other gods to serve them and to worship them. And do not provoke me to anger with the work of your hands, and I will do you no harm. Yet you have not listened to me, declares Yahweh, in order that you might provoke me to anger with the works of your hands to your own harm. Therefore, thus says Yahweh of hosts, because you have not obeyed my words, behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, declares Yahweh, and I will send to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land and against its inhabitants and against all these nations round about, and I will utterly destroy them and make them a horror and a hissing and an everlasting desolation. Moreover, I will take from them the voice of joy and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstone and the light of the lamp. This whole land will be a desolation and a horror, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then it will be, when 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, declares Yahweh, for their iniquity in the land of the Chaldeans, and I will make an everlasting desolation. I will bring upon that land all my words which I have pronounced against it, all that is written in this book which Jeremiah has prophesied against all the nations. For many nations and great kings will make slaves of them, even them, and I will recompense them according to their deeds and according to the works of their hands. Okay? So keep that in mind. Okay? We have the setup. Israel's going to fall away from Yahweh. There's going to be certain terms of the covenant that kick in at that point, the punishments, the curses of the Torah, of the law. Okay? By the way, when Paul talks about the curse of the law being nailed to the cross, this is what he's talking about. The law has blessings and curses. Okay? We don't have these temporal punishments anymore now that Yahshua has paid the price at Calvary. Okay? So, we're not having, we don't have death penalties and all these things like the Torah normally stipulates. Okay? The curses are gone. Okay? The temporal ones anyway. Okay, we still have to focus on our eternal well-being though. Sidebar there. So because of that, they're going to have to be kicked out of the land, so the land will keep its Sabbath rests. Okay. Now Jeremiah talks here about doing that in Babylon, and I had it ready to go. I lost my page marker, but Jeremiah has another specific prophecy where he ties in this 70 years of Babylonian captivity to the number of years that the Sabbath years were not kept. Okay, so this 70 years in Babylon is a fulfillment of what Yahweh said he was going to do back in Leviticus. Okay, so it's like you tell your kids, if you don't do your school, I'm going to take away the Game Boy. So the kid doesn't do a school, and you take away the Game Boy. Okay, so you have to follow through with the discipline that you promise. Otherwise, you look like an idiot basically, and you lose any credibility you have with that child. Okay. So Yahweh is following through with his punishment here to try to discipline his child, Israel, and get them to kind of figure out, hey, I need to actually, hunker down and actually be obedient to my father. He's got, my best interests in heart, right? Okay, so that in mind, now we're going to go to Daniel chapter 9. I always think it's, for me personally, I find it fascinating when I watch a Bible teaching about a certain scripture and they get to the scripture later in the study. I don't know, that's funny to me. So that's what I'm doing here. So Daniel chapter 9, I'm going to read the whole chapter in context, okay? And as I read through this, I'm hoping that certain key words, key phrases, and concepts from what we read earlier in Leviticus and Jeremiah will kind of trigger your thought process as we read through this, okay? In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of Median descent, who was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of years which was revealed as the word of Yahweh to Jeremiah the prophet for the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Okay, so Daniel is reading what we just read in Jeremiah. He has access to those writings of the prophet Jeremiah. Now, by this time, we've already had Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar's been dealt with. Medo-Persia has taken over Babylon, and they're the new sheriff in town. So if you noticed when we read in Jeremiah, he's talking about Babylon. We're past Babylon now. Now we're into Persia. And so, Daniel's got to be looking at this and he's thinking, like, okay, we're getting up towards the end of the 70 years now. So something's got to move. And so he's starting to kind of revisit Jeremiah's prophecies here and kind of wonder what the end game is. So I gave my attention to Yahweh Elohim to seek him by prayer and supplications with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. I prayed to Yahweh my Elohim and confessed and said, Alas, O Yahweh, the great and awesome Elohim, who keeps his covenant and loving kindness with those who love him and keep his commandments. We have sinned, committed iniquity, acted wickedly, and rebelled, even turning aside from your commandments and ordinances. Okay, so pause. He's confessing to doing everything that Yahweh said he was going to punish Israel for back in Leviticus that I read earlier, those curses. Those curses are a direct result of what Daniel is confessing to here on behalf of the people. So he's making that connection there. Moreover, we have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, our fathers, and all the people of the land. Righteousness belongs to you, O Yahweh, but to us open shame, as it is this day. To the men of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and all Israel, those who are nearby and those who are far away, and all the countries to which you have driven them, because of their unfaithful deeds which they have committed against you. Open shame belongs to us, O master, to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, because we have sinned against you. To Yahweh our Elohim belongs compassion and forgiveness, for we have rebelled against him. Nor have we obeyed the voice of Yahweh our Elohim to walk in his teachings, which he set before us through his servants the prophets. Indeed, all Israel has transgressed your law, your Torah, and turned aside, not obeying your voice. So the curse, a la Leviticus 26, has been poured out on us, along with the oath which is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God. For we have sinned against him. Thus he has confirmed his words, which he had spoken against us, and against our rulers who ruled us, to bring on us great calamity. For under the whole heaven there has not been done anything like what was done to Jerusalem. So Daniel's connecting the dots here, that Yahweh said, if you do X, Y, Z, I'm going to bring certain punishment on you. And Yahweh followed through with that discipline. Okay, he's making that connection here. As it is written in the law of Moses, which we read earlier, all this calamity has come on us. Yet we have not sought the favor of Yahweh our Elohim by turning from our iniquity and giving attention to your truth. Therefore Yahweh has kept the calamity in store and brought it on us. For Yahweh our Elohim is righteous with respect to all his deeds which he has done, but we have not obeyed his voice. And now, Yahweh our Elohim, who have brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and have made a name for yourself, as it is this day, we have sinned, we have been wicked. O Yahweh, in accordance with all your righteous acts, let now your anger and your wrath turn away from your city Jerusalem, your holy mountain. For because of our sins and the iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and your people have become a reproach to all those around us. So now, our Elohim, listen to the prayer of your servant and to his supplications, and for your sake, O Yahweh, let your face shine on your desolate sanctuary. O my Elohim, incline your ear and hear. Open your eyes and see our desolations, and the city which is called by your name. For we are not presenting our supplications before you on account of any merits of our own, but on account of your great compassion. O Yahweh, hear. O Yahweh, forgive. O Yahweh, listen and take action. For your own sake, O my Elohim, do not delay, because your city and your people are called by your name. Okay, so Daniel is doing exactly what it says to do. Back in Leviticus 26, it said that the people needed to confess their sins. And that's exactly what he's doing here. And he's acknowledging that the punishment that came onto them with this Babylonian captivity is a direct result of that sinful behavior of the nation. Okay? So I want to go back up, and I want to focus in on a specific scripture. Let's go back up to verse 12. Thus he confirmed his words, which he had spoken against us and against our rulers who ruled us, to bring on us great calamity. For under the whole heaven there has not been done anything like what was done to Jerusalem. Okay? So he's connecting it again back to what we read earlier. He's confirming his words. This is what I mentioned earlier, Keep your grades up or I'm going to take your Game Boy. And then I take the Game Boy. I confirmed my word, okay? So like if I make an agreement with my kid, to use the Game Boy as an example, it's archaic technology from the 90s, but that's, a product of my bringing, I guess. So Anyway, the agreement is you get A's for this semester and you keep your Game Boy. If you don't get A's, I take away your Game Boy. Okay, that's a covenant. That's an agreement between two parties, assuming the kid agrees, which, they kind of don't have a choice. So, anyway, so that's the setup here, okay? Now, this is what Daniel's doing. He's thinking about everything that we just read. And this is heavy on him, and he's really trying to reach out to Yahweh, and he's trying to bring some kind of fulfillment to this, okay? So, we're going to continue in verse 20. Now, while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before Yahweh my Elohim in behalf of the holy mountain of my Elohim, while I was still speaking in prayer, then the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision previously, came to me in my extreme weariness about the time of the evening offering. So Gabriel just busts up in there and interrupts him in the middle of this prayer. This has got to be just a fantastic thing to witness if you're Daniel. He gave me instruction and talked with me and said, "O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you insight with understanding. At the beginning of your supplications the command was issued, and I have come to tell you, for you are highly esteemed. So give heed to the message and gain understanding of the vision." Okay, so Daniel's here to basically respond to Daniel's prayer. So what was Daniel's prayer? Daniel's initial prayer was, Yahweh, please, I'm paraphrasing him, please help me understand Jeremiah's 70 years. What's this about? Is it coming to an end, basically? I just kind of want to know what's going on. And then he's praying for forgiveness of the people, he's confessing the sins of the people, and he's praying for restoration, because when you read through the prophets earlier, they talk about, Israel's going to sin, they're going to do all this stuff, there's going to be punishment, but at the end of that, there's going to be a restoration. So Daniel's hanging his hat on that hope, and he's really looking forward to this restoration, and he's got to be excited about it, because he's almost at the end of that 70 years, so it's coming. So continuing, I'm in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. 70 weeks, and in the Hebrew, that's literally 77s, okay, have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression. I want to pause a second. What I'm reading here, this is typically what people just go right to when they go to Daniel 9. They skip over Daniel's prayer, and they just go right to this, because this is the fun part. This is where we get into prophecy and everything, okay? But we completely miss the context. Okay, so 70 weeks, 77s have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be rebuilt again, with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. And its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war. Desolations are determined. And he will make a firm covenant. This is the part I want to focus on. This is the part that people are freaking out about. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, or 1 7. But in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. Okay, so the conventional reckoning of all this is that the 70 weeks started, the 77s, started with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. Now, depending on which scholar you're talking to, there's a few different schools of thought on which decree that was, because we find out that there were like at least 2. Okay, which one are we using for our starting count? And so, whichever one it is, you start counting, okay, and then you get up into the times of First Temple. You have Yahshua comes on the scene, okay, and you have this stuff taking place, and then we get to our 69 weeks, our 69 sevens, and then we just have this long gap of time. Okay, so we've completed our 69 sevens during the time of Yahshua, culminating with his death, because it talks about the Messiah being cut off, right? And then we just have this gap of almost 2,000 years before we hit our 70th week, okay? So my question is, what is there in the text that would trigger us to make that leap of logic to skip that vast amount of time before we, from week 69 to week 70. Okay? Because that's the prevailing school of thought. The Great Tribulation that's coming up is tied in with this last week, this last 7, right? The prevailing view is that as we get down here, and it talks about he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, 1/7, okay? So what's going to happen is, and this is what people were talking about online, the Antichrist is expected to come on the scene. Nobody will know he's the Antichrist quite yet, okay? He's kind of this man of political intrigue and whatever, right? So he makes a peace deal with Israel, and it's a 7-year deal, okay? And the way this is projected to go down, there's different flavors of this, but this is the overall gist of it among most like premillennials, evangelicals and whatnot, okay? That will allow the Jews to start rebuilding the temple, okay? So they will build the temple, they'll get the sacrifices up and running, everything will be great, and then 3.5 years into that, okay, because it talks about in the middle of the week, he's going to go in there and he's going to shut the whole thing down. Cut it out, guys. Stop the sacrifices. He's going to put the brakes on it, right? He's going to set up the abomination of desolation, which is typically some type of an idol, something reminiscent of Antiochus Epiphanes when he went in and sacked the temple during the time of the Maccabees, something like that to defile the temple. And he's going to go in there and declare himself to be God. That's going to usher in the last half of the 7 years, the last half of the week, 3.5 years, which is the Great Tribulation. This is the 1,260 days. This is the 42 months. This is the times, and half the times that it talks about in other spots in Daniel and also in the book of Revelation. Okay? That's the prevailing view. I'm going to challenge that here. Okay? I think there are some major flaws in that. I'm not going to address the 69 weeks, okay, because I have question marks on that myself as far as the timing, based on points I made earlier. I'm going to address this last week, okay, that everybody's focused on right now, okay? Now, I'm going to start in verse 27. He will make a firm covenant. When you look in the Hebrew, the underlying meaning is actually more accurately to say he will strengthen, or he will cause the covenant to be firm. It's implied that the covenant already exists, and he's strengthening it. So in the underlying Hebrew, we're not talking about establishing a new covenant from scratch. We're talking about taking an existing covenant and strengthening it. Now, if you remember what we read earlier, it sounds a lot like what we read, right? The confirmation of the covenant, doing what he said he was going to do, taking the words of the covenant, the blessings and the curses, and specifically we're focusing on the curses here, and confirming that, actually following through with the discipline. Okay? Now, I know that this is a little bit dicey because in this little section here, we have a bunch of pronouns that when you follow the syntax of the sentences, they don't really clearly track back to a subject. We've got the Messiah and we've got the Prince to come. Okay, those are your two guys we're talking about here. The he's here, grammatically, it's ambiguous which one of those are coming back to. So you have one group of people who think that the one doing the covenant is the Antichrist doing his 7-year deal. Some people think that this was actually Yahshua confirming the covenant when he came in his first advent, and then being cut off in the middle, and then you had a little bit of time after that with the establishment of the early first century church, okay? So those are the two different schools of thought, generally speaking. Okay, so he's literally going to take an existing covenant and he's going to strengthen it. He's going to confirm it with many for 1/7. Okay, so depending on how we define that 7, is it 7 years? I know that Michael Rood pointed out that the Hebrew word for 7, where it talks about weeks, is actually Shabuah, which has the implication of the Feast of Shavuot, which comes along every year. So I mean, you can equivalent that to 7 years because it's a 1 per year festival, okay? So in that school of thought, 70 weeks, 70 Shabuah, is actually 70 years. And we kind of got into some interesting hijinks back in 2018. In my mind, it's kind of a repeat of the Great Disappointment of 1844. You had the Millerites back then who were convinced, based on Daniel's date counts and everything, the day for a year principle with the 1260 and the 2300 and all that stuff, that 1844 was going to be the year Jesus came back. Well, he didn't show up. So they were just massively let down. And then you had the Seventh-day Adventists come along and say, well, 1844 really was the date. It just happened all entirely in the spiritual realm, so we can't see it. You know, what a way to save face, right? So 2018 was 70 years after the establishment of the modern-day state of Israel in 1948. So a lot of people, I mentioned Michael Rood, he was one of many, took this and ran with it. Okay, so they said, from 1948, 70 years takes us to 2018, and then Messiah should return. Well, 2018 came and went, and he hasn't come. Okay, so I haven't really. I'm sorry, but when you set a date like that and you're so dogmatic about it and you completely miss it, you lose credibility for me. And I generally like Michael Rood, but I just have a hard time following somebody who is willing to take such a big step, and then a lot of these guys don't even admit that they were wrong. They just move right on to set the next date. So anyway, that was one interpretation of the 70 weeks that obviously didn't happen, obviously was incorrect. Okay, so to keep reading, in the middle of this 7, he, whoever the he is, will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. Now this ties in with what I mentioned earlier. This is the conventional wisdom is that if the he is referring to the Antichrist, this is where he shuts down the temple worship system, he stops the sacrifices cold, comes in the middle of the 7, 3.5 years, and declares himself to be God, etc., right? Okay, I'm going to propose an alternate position to that. Okay, and I'm going to use the he in the terms of the Messiah. Okay, and I think that there's pretty clear evidence that the Messiah, Yahshua, is Yahweh. Okay, is Yahweh, the one that our fathers were dealing with in the Old Testament, by and large. Okay, occasionally you'd have angels come and deal with them, but when it was talking about Yahweh talking to somebody, that was Yahshua, or in Christian parlance, Jesus. Okay, so I think that he is the one that the he is referring to. That's my personal view. Okay, so how is he going to stop the sacrifice and grain offering? You're thinking like, that doesn't really make any sense. Like, if he's got a temple set up to worship him, and they're doing all the stuff, why would he stop it? It makes sense for the Antichrist to stop it. But why would the Messiah stop it? Okay? And it goes back to confirming the covenant. It goes back to what the whole reason Daniel is praying. The whole reason Gabriel came to Daniel was because Daniel was praying about this covenant, and he was praying about the punishments that were coming on because of Israel breaking the covenant. So following that same theme, it makes sense that we would be talking about that aspect of the covenant, confirming the covenant, the disciplinary action, okay? So how would he confirm that aspect of the covenant by stopping the sacrifice and grain offering? We're going to go to Joel, the book of Joel. Not to look at the blood moons. That's another thing that kind of disappointed. I don't know how many people are disappointed because I think a lot of people just glossed over it. But we had our blood moon tetrad that was supposedly this big thing, and nothing really happened. So that was pulled out of Joel, and another thing where we kind of jumped the gun and didn't really understand what was being said. So in Joel, I'm going to start reading in. I'm going to start reading in chapter 1, verse 13. And he uses this language multiple times throughout the book of Joel. I'm just going to read it the once. It's enough to establish the concept. So chapter 1, verse 13. Gird yourselves with sackcloth and lament, O priests. Wail, O ministers of the altar. Come, spend the night in sackcloth, O ministers of my Elohim. For the grain offering and the drink offering are withheld from the house of your Elohim. Okay? So the grain offering and the drink offering are withheld from the house of your Elohim. Okay? That ties in. Okay, so the Antichrist comes into the temple and he withholds the sacrifices. Okay, same functional thing here. Okay, now when we read the book of Joel, I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but what's the mechanism? We read about the locusts, right? Locusts, 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 swarms of locusts. Okay, he's withholding the grain and the sacrifices because of famine. He's bringing a judgment on his people. The same thing that triggered Daniel's prayer to begin with and triggered Gabriel's response was Israel's judgment. Okay, so Yahweh puts this famine on the land as part of that judgment, and that's one of the plagues back in Leviticus, one of the curses of the law. Okay, he brings on famine as a punishment. Well, guess what? If you have famine, you don't have grain. Your crops die, right? So if you don't have grain, you can't go in the temple and make your daily grain offerings. You can't do the first fruits. You can't do Shavuot. Anything that involves a grain offering in the temple, you can't do because you don't have a grain crop. Okay? So, and the same thing for the libation offering, for the wine offering. If you have a famine and you don't have a grape crop, where's your wine coming from? And I guess you could use old stock wine, vintage, for a while, but eventually you're going to run out if the famine's long enough, right? Same thing for your grain reserve. People have to eat it. Okay? So, and of course, it stands to reason too that, the pasture land dries up. What are your cattle going to eat? The oxen, the sheep, the goats that you would sacrifice in the temple, what are they going to eat? If the famine gets severe enough, the famine itself is what cuts off the sacrifices. And the famine is a direct punishment from Yahweh on the people's sin and rebellion. Okay? So it's my position that what this is talking about is actually an end times judgment on Yahweh's people. Okay? And that's a broad topic to get into, but when you read the prophets, especially the big three, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, the minors talk about it too, but Yahweh's people are going to be judged in the end. We keep looking for this big revival that's going to happen. The gospel is going to go out all around the world, and it's just going to be this big epic thing. The Bible says the opposite. Paul talks about the great falling away. Okay, you have to have this great apostasy before the man of lawlessness is revealed. That's not a revival. Okay, so Yahweh's people are going to, in the end, bring on punishments upon themselves. And this is talking about specifically in the land of Israel and Judah, where Jerusalem is. Okay, so I think that this is all he's really saying. Because with the Antichrist, okay, I mentioned this before on my YouTube channel. I put up a video called Multiple Messiahs. I tried to be a prop master with it using different visual references, and I don't think I pulled it off all that well, but hopefully there's enough there to get the point. I won't rehash it all there. But I will say this. If we're all focused on the conventional, like Hal Lindsey, Jack Van Impe, Tim LaHaye, whatever model of what this is going to look like, okay? Like I mentioned today with Trump's peace initiative, right? People, the moment they found out it was not a 7-year deal, oh, he can't be the Antichrist. They already had it ruled out based on this. And there are some other, scriptures that they use to kind of bolster this, but this is the one that they go to, primarily for that evidence, right? Okay, so my point is that first off, I think we're grossly misinterpreting Daniel chapter 9. I don't think that this is anywhere close to a prediction of the Antichrist's rise to power, a 7-year peace treaty, 3.5 years in, he does the whole thing. I don't see that here. And if we're hyper-focused looking for that to happen, my concern is that the people of Yahweh are going to miss the boat. And when the anti-Messiah does show up, and we're looking over here for him, he's going to show up over here and nobody's going to be looking. That's my concern, because the devil's not an idiot. He's not stupid, Like, it makes no sense for all of Christendom, to be looking for a specific blueprint of what the Antichrist is going to look like. And then for the devil to send somebody that matches that. Wow. That's That's great. That's so deceptive. But it's not. It doesn't make any sense. What does make sense is if he's going to deceive the whole world, when Yahshua talks about even the elect might be deceived, the only way you're going to do that is to present something that no one's looking for, right? That's the nature of deception. It's sneakiness. It's trickery. You don't come out and do what's expected. You're not going to trick anybody by doing what they expect. So everybody's expecting a 7-year deal, ad nauseum with all this stuff. And I'm here saying, for whatever it's worth, I think that's completely the wrong tack. Okay? I think that we've fallen into a prophetic trap, where we're using these as proof texts, because we have this nice little, we have make our nice little charts, and we have everything all figured out all perfectly, and that's what we're looking for. And when it doesn't happen, then we're safe, right? There's no rapture, and whatever. So that's basically all I wanted to present on Daniel chapter 9. I could tie it in with the other stuff. I kind of want to get into Revelation and connect it right now, but it's getting late, and I just will save that for later, I guess. But anyway, I realize it's kind of unorthodox, so if you have any questions, if you think I'm wrong, and you want to dialogue about it, that's fine. Maybe I am. I don't know. Anyway, good night, everyone. I'm going to go to bed because I have to get up early to go to work tomorrow. And anyway, good night, everyone. Yahweh bless, and thanks for tuning in.